Good morning. We will pay attention to the effect of transactions on the accounting equation. Remember, the accounting equation is assets equals owner's equity plus liabilities. So you first of all have to decide whether an account is debited or credited. To make that easier, use the word Alice, and the first letter and the last letter of Alice will increase on the debit side. So that means assets and expenses increases on the debit side, and assets and expenses always have debit balances. The three in the middle will always have credit balances, and they will always increase on the credit side. So liabilities, income, and capital that belongs to the owner will always have credit balances and will increase on the credit side. We will use this accounting equation to do these calculations and effect of the transactions on the accounting equation in three different ways, so that you can see how you have to think out every entry. So the duality principle applies. That means that there must be a dual effect on the accounting equation so that the equation can stay the same, and the relation between assets and owner's equity must be the same. According to this double entry principle, a double entry will be completed for each transaction. So for every transaction that you record, you will debit one account and you will credit another account. If we look at the first entry, the owner deposited 50,000 Rand in the bank as capital contribution. The money is paid into the bank, therefore the money in the bank will increase, and bank is an asset, so the net effect is that our assets will increase with 5,000. Because the owner contributes money, he's increasing his interest in the business, and therefore the business owes him more money, so owner's equity will increase with 5,000 Rand. In the general ledger, remember the accounts on the debit side is the left-hand side, and the right-hand side is your credit side. So debit on your left-hand side, credit on the right-hand side. You've put money into the bank. Bank is an asset. Assets increase on the debit side. Therefore, the bank will be debited with 50,000 Rand. And capital was provided by the owner. The capital increases on the credit side and decrease on the debit side. So capital is credited and bank account is debited to complete the double entry. The bank account is debited, so we increase the money in the bank, so the assets increase with 5,000. The capital account is credited because the owner increases his money in the business, so the owner's equity increase with 5,000 Rand. Bought cleaning materials on credit, so we don't pay for it immediately from now for 900 Rand. We owe more money to the creditor, so it means that the liabilities will increase with 900 Rand. Cleaning material is an expense because we use it in the business, and expenses decrease profit, so the owner will get less profit, so therefore the owner's equity will decrease. The cleaning material account will be debited with 900 Rand. Cleaning materials expense. Expenses increase on the debit side and decrease on the credit side. The account of A now will be credited because he's a creditor to us now, and liabilities increase on the credit side and decrease on the debit side. So we owe him the money, so cleaning materials will be credited in his account. The word that I write in his account will indicate where is my double entry. So I can go and look in the cleaning material account for the double entry. Expense cleaning material is debited because we have more expenses. Expenses increase on the debit side. Because we pay expense, the profits will decrease, so the equity will decrease with 900. We buy on credit, so Nell is a creditor to us. So creditors control will be credited and Nell will be credited. And we owe money, so that means our liabilities will increase. Paid 60 Rand, so we took money out of the bank to buy stationery. The money in the bank will decrease, therefore the assets will decrease because we have less money in the bank. Stationery is expense because if we use it, we don't have any more stationery and it will not cause an inflow of money in the future. Expenses decrease profits, so the equity will decrease because the owner will get less profits. The stationery account is an expense. Expenses increase on the debit side and decrease on the credit side. So stationery will be debited with 60 Rand and we take the money out of the bank, so the bank account will be credited with 60. In the bank account, we write the word stationery to know that the double entry was completed in your stationery account. Stationery expense is debited because we increase expenses. If we increase expenses, we will decrease the profit, so equity will decrease. Bank is an asset. We have less money in the bank, so my assets will decrease with 60. Bought inventory for 20,480 from P. Steyn on credit. So we don't pay for it immediately, we buy it on credit. Therefore, we increase our inventory. Inventory is an asset, so my assets will increase. We owe the money to a creditor, so it means that my liabilities will increase. In the ledger, I will debit my inventory account because inventory is an asset. Assets increase on the debit side. We owe the money to P. Steyn. Creditors' liabilities increase on the credit side. We bought inventory, so inventory asset increase on the debit side. P. Steyn, we owe the money to him, so he's a creditor, and that means our liabilities increase on the credit side. Paid the telephone account by check 120 Rand. So we take money out of the bank and we pay the telephone. We have less money in the bank, so the assets will decrease. Telephone is an expense that will decrease the profits, so the equity will decrease. The telephone account will be debited because it's an expense and expenses increase on the debit side and decrease on the credit side. The money is taken out of the bank, so the money in the bank is reduced on the credit side. The telephone account will be debited. That's an expense that will decrease profit, so equity will decrease. The bank account is credited because we reduce the money in the bank, so my assets will be decreased. Bought cleaning materials and paid by check. Cleaning materials is an expense, so it means that the expense will decrease my equity because we will make less profits and the money is taken out of the bank, so the bank will also decrease. Cleaning materials, the account will be debited because expenses increase on the debit side. We've taken the money out of the bank, so the bank account will be credited to reduce the money in the bank. An invoice for 200 to Kun for services rendered. Look at the invoice. An invoice can be received when we receive services from someone else. If we issue the invoice, it means that we provided services to someone else. So this services rendered is an income for the business. The person didn't pay for it immediately, so we will have to debit Koen's account, and if he owes us money, he's a debtor. So my debtors will increase. Debtors is an asset, so my assets will increase. Services rendered is an income because we rendered the service to someone else. Income increases my profits, so my equity will increase. Koen's account will be debited because he's a debtor. He owes us the money, so he's an asset. Assets increase on the debit side and decrease on the credit side. Services rendered is an income. Income increase on the credit side and decrease on the debit side. So services rendered will be credited. Issued a check for 90 Rand to pay the owner's personal telephone account. Whatever is paid on behalf of the owner, whether it's the school fees for his children, his wife's hairdresser, or whatever, if he takes goods out of the business or he takes money out of the business, it is drawings. And drawings will reduce equity. So it means that if he takes money, the money in the bank will decrease and his equity will decrease because now he has less money in the business. The bank account is credited because the money was taken out of the bank, and the drawings account is debited. So the owner has two accounts. Capital account that will always increase on the credit side. Drawings when he takes goods or money from the business, and that means it will increase on the debit side. So whenever you do transactions in connection with the owner, you will write it in the capital account or in the drawings account. Cash sales for 16,000. As soon as we sell something and we use the perpetual inventory system, it means that we have to complete two double entries. One double entry for the sales price and one double entry for the cost price. So first of all, we will record the entry for the 16,000. It's cash sales, so we put the money in the bank. Therefore, the bank account will be debited and the money in the bank will increase, so my assets will increase. Sales account will increase profits, so equity will increase with the sales price. So the money that we put into the bank is the sales price. The money that will increase my profits is sales price. So bank and sales will go together. The profit of 60% on cost price was made. So that means we have to go and calculate what is the cost price of the goods so that we can complete the second part of this entry. Now remember, it's a profit of 60% on cost. If the profit is on cost, then the cost price will be worth 100%. The profit is 60% and the sales price is 160%. The sales price was 16,000. So because we know the sales price, we will write the 16,000 next to the 160. If we want to determine the cost price, we will use the 16,000 times the 100 that we want to calculate over the one that we know, 160, and that will give us 10,000 Rand. We take the inventory out of our stock to sell it, so it means that we've got less inventory available, so our inventory decreased, so my assets will decrease because inventory is an asset. Cost of sales will decrease my profits. Cost of sales is an expense. Expenses decrease profit, so my equity will decrease. The first entry in the ledger will be for the sales, and the sales figure is 16,000, so the money in the bank increased with 16,000. Assets increase on the debit side, so we will debit bank. The double entry will be recorded in the sales account because we increase sales. Sales is an income increase on the credit side and decrease on the debit side. The second entry will be for the cost of sales. So we've taken inventory out of our stock, so our assets decrease. So I will credit the inventory account to show that I've got less inventory, and I will record the cost of sales on the debit side to complete the double entry. Cost of sales is an expense. Expenses increase on the debit side and decrease on the credit side. We will have to do two double entries. The first one will be for the sales price, where we show that the money in the bank increased, so the assets increase on the debit side. Sales is an income increases on the credit side, and that will increase my profit. The second entry will be for cost of sales. Cost of sales is an expense. Expenses increase on the debit side. I take it out of the inventory, so I've got less inventory. Inventory is an asset, so I've got less inventory. So it means that my assets decrease. Cost of sales is the expense. Expenses decrease my profit. So when we do a sales transaction in the perpetual inventory system, we will have two double entries. The first one will be at the sales price, and the second one will be at the cost price. Credit sales for 16,000, but now if we look at the profit, it's 60% on sales price. In number one, the profit was 60% on cost price. First of all, we will record the entry for the sales of 16,000. So we have to do a double entry to indicate that the debtors increase. Debtors is an asset, so my assets will increase. We sell the goods at 16,000. The debtors owe us 16,000. So sales will increase my profit. The profit is on sales price. If the profit is on cost price, then cost price is 100. If profit is on sales price, then sales price will equal 100. The profit is 60%, so the cost price must be less than the sales price. So I must deduct the 60 from the 100 to determine that the cost price is 40%. The sales price is given as 16,000. So I will calculate the cost price using the 60,000. I want to calculate the 40. So 40 at the top, the one that's known, 100 at the bottom, and that will give me 6,400. My second double entry will then be for the inventory. So we've taken 6,400 out of our inventory to sell it. So my inventory decreased, so my assets will decrease. The cost of sales expense will decrease my profits, so equity will decrease. My first double entry in the ledger will be for the sales price. Sut owes us 16,000, so we will debit Sut because he's a debtor if he owes us money, and debtors and assets increase on the debit side and decrease on the credit side. We will increase our sales income on the credit side to complete that double entry. Then we will do an entry for the cost of sales. So I will show that the inventory decreases with 6,400, and I will debit my cost of sales account to complete the double entry. I will have to complete two double entries again. One double entry at sales price, the second one at cost price. We sell the goods to Soot, so Soot debtor will be debited, sales will be credited. Debtor is an asset, so assets increase. Sales is an income that will increase my profits, so equity will increase. We've taken the things out of our inventory, so my inventory asset decreases. The expense cost of sales is debited to increase the expense. Expenses decrease profits, so my profit will decrease with 6,400. That will reduce equity. So what did we learn today? According to the accounting equation, assets equals equity plus liabilities. Assets and expenses always increase on the debit side. Liabilities, income, and equity always increase on the credit side. So to remember, write down the word Alice so that it's easy for you to remember which ones will increase on the debit side. The first letter of Alice and the last letter of Alice, assets and expenses, will increase on the debit side. Liabilities, income, capital will increase on the credit side. For every entry that you complete, you have to do a double entry. That means you have to do one on the debit side and a similar entry on the credit side to complete the double entry for the same figure.